The trailer for Thor, Love and Thunder still isn't out. It's still not out. I'm a clown. So I thought, why not dig into Thor and Jane's relationship? Let's have a look at it. Let's look at some of the elements of their relationship that are really massive, glaring red flags, albeit, yes, we're dealing with gods and Asgard and legends and myths and kings and queens and all these things. So it's not real life, but we're going to look at it through a few different lenses. And we'll also talk about why I think Jane's really codependent, why I think the relationship isn't healthy, and frankly, why I think it's the least compelling relationship in the entire MCU. Got a lot to say. It's going to be a long video, but the chapters are along the bottom, so you can kind of flick to the part that feels most compelling to you. Let's crack on. Before we do, welcome to Love and Fandom, where we believe the relationships we see on the screen help us understand ourselves at a deeper level and have a better relationship with ourselves and each other. I'm Cheryl Muir, relationship expert, full-time nerd, professional fangirl, and lover of the Thor movies. The Thor movies are my favourite in the entire MCU. I've probably seen each Thor movie about 10 times. So this video may just be me quoting scenes from the Thor films. These are my favourite films for many different reasons. I love Asgard. I wish we'd seen more of Asgard. I think it's really, really compelling, really, really exciting, interesting. I want to know about their culture. Who are they? They're these advanced beings. Like, I want to know more. Give us more. Obviously, when we see Thor and Jane, we only really see them together in Thor 1 and Thor the Dark World. She's referenced throughout. She's referenced in a number of different MCU films. She's referenced in the Avengers. She's referenced as well in, I think it's either Age of Ultron or maybe Infinity War or Endgame, when Thor kind of, you know, lets himself go and he talks about Jane, and she's referenced in Thor Ragnarok when they say that Jane dumped him. So there are numerous references to Jane. I understand Natalie Portman kind of threw in the towel after the Dark World for many different reasons. We won't go there. I love her as an actress. I love Jane Foster as a character. I don't love their relationship. I'm going to give you 5 points. Nay, 7 points. They're both good and bad, so we can really get a really varied look at their relationship. As always, I'm going to give you some questions for you to ask yourself. So it's not just us looking at these characters, but also seeing what we can learn about ourselves and our relationships through this. Before we do, though, there's a few things I just want to get off my chest and give you a bit of a background into what I think about Thor and Jane's relationship and why I'm not the biggest fan. I don't find it that exciting. I don't find it believable. That's what I mean when I say I don't find their relationship that compelling. I don't find it believable. I don't get behind it. I think that there are a number of relationships in the MCU which are really, really real and deep and true. I think MJ and Peter from the Tom Holland Spider-Man universe, I think, is very, very compelling. Gwen and Peter from Andrew Garfield's iteration of Spider-Man. So that's not the MCU though, really, although it's kind of crossing over now. I really, really like, actually, Tony Stark and Pepper Potts. I think that's probably one of the best relationships in the MCU. Incidentally, controversial opinion, I find Tony Stark absolutely insufferable. I find him highly irritating. I think I'm allergic to him. I just can't. Oh, it really gets under my skin and gets on my nerves. But I really like their relationship. I found it very real, very grounded, very deep. We all know, of course, what Tony Stark's arc was, and how it all ended. And I did shed a few tears at the end of his story because it was really beautiful. But in general, I just don't particularly like him. But I found their relationship very true to life. There was chemistry. There was banter. I feel like some of that was maybe lacking with Thor and Jane. So let's get into it. I have to put on my glasses because I haven't got my contacts in today. So the number one thing that the first thing I want to discuss with you is that Jane falls apart when he leaves and she drops everything when he comes back. So we especially see this in like Thor the Dark World. We see the aftermath of how she's left by him at the end of Thor 1, and she just waits around for literally years. She literally waits around for about 2 years for this guy that she's known for a week. We also get an idea and an insight into some of Jane Foster's relationship patterns. You know, in the first Thor movie where she gives him some clothing that allegedly belongs to her previous partner, so we can start to make some assumptions. He was also a very muscular man because his clothing fits Thor. But Donald Blake, I think, right? And she rips off the name tags and she says, sorry, ex-boyfriend, very good with numbers, very bad with relationships. So we're already getting a sense of how Jane has some relationship patterns that are maybe not serving her. She's choosing people that are bad with relationships. Do we know it's a pattern or not? Well, I would say yes, because we see what starts to happen with Thor, which we'll get into. But that this is interesting to me, and I'll tell you why it's interesting. She is an astrophysicist with 3 PhDs, and she is attracted to this guy who is, I mean, Thor, let's be honest about Thor. He's not very bright. He's kind of like muscles, muscles, not brains. And so for that reason, I don't feel like they're a very good fit. I don't think they're intellectual equals at all. And why would it be that someone very intelligent, why would it be a really smart woman is struggling in love and choosing the wrong ones? It's actually really, really common. If I look at some of my clients, they're all really, really smart people. And actually, intelligence has nothing to do with how healthy our relationships are. They're completely unrelated. You can be incredibly smart, have a wonderful career, and also be choosing people that are not good for you because of what you experienced when you were small, about your place in relationships, some of the beliefs that you built up because of what you saw happen between your parents. There's a whole lot going on there. So I actually find that very accurate and very true to life, that she's very successful and she's very intelligent and she's struggling in relationships. That's quite legit. What else did I want to say about this? So she falls apart when she leaves and she drops everything when he comes back. The part in the dark world where she's found the gravitational anomaly and she's there, she gets drawn into the place where the ether is, the ether enters her, and then she sees Thor. She does slap him. She basically says, like, where the fuck have you been? But then she's like kind of looking into his eyes and like, oh, she kind of falls apart and he's back. Oh my God. And next thing, she's off to Asgard. He's just been here for like 2 minutes. Okay, she's got the thing inside of her and it's exploding. But she's like, there's no question. She's just going off with him. Now, here's what I want to get you to ask yourself. Where do you do this? Not where do you like escape with Thor to Asgard, but where do you drop everything when someone comes back? Where do you maybe not hold them accountable for their behavior, and or just believe them by looking at their behavior, and going, here's someone who's ghosted me for 2 years and now they're coming back. Like, is that someone I really want to partner with again? Now, I know that, marauders were marauding and pillagers were pillaging and he had to end the slaughter, but in general, in real life, this is not good. This is not good if someone's just ghosting and coming back and you're like falling apart when they leave and dropping everything when they come back. It's not great. So point number 2. So that's bad. Point number 2. Thor, in Thor 1, Thor becomes who he's meant to be because of her. So this is actually a really good thing. In the first Thor film, he's cocky. He goes to Earth and he's like, oh, all these like Midgardians, like he looks down on everyone. And then we see him go on this arc, which is why, of course, we all care about Thor, because we see this journey that he goes on. And he goes on this journey because of her. So he becomes the best version of himself. He sacrifices himself to protect her, to protect her friends, to protect these mortals. And he's not the kind of cocky young prince anymore. He's evolving. I think they could have actually spent some more time over that. I felt like it was a little rushed in that first movie, but it did work. And that's a positive thing. If someone helps you to be a more like compassionate, loving, patient, caring version of yourself who's less judgmental, that's a really positive thing, right? Third point, this next point's bad. Thor's mum and brother are murdered because of her. So this isn't great. I don't know why I'm laughing. I'm laughing because it's like kind of ridiculous. So she goes to Asgard in Thor: The Dark World. As a direct result of her being there, Frigga is killed. Still gets me every time. That funeral scene, I'm always like shaking and crying because I find it so beautiful, and like we see her kind of soul leave, and it's the whole thing is just like, it really affects me emotionally. There's that beautiful score, and you see the stars and the waterfall off the end of Asgard, the whole thing, like it's like a Viking funeral at sea. Just, I mean, amazing. So and the bit with Odin with the staff with Gungnir, and he kind of clangs it and that signifies her soul leaving, the whole thing. I mean, it's just beautiful. Incidentally, they should have let Loki go to the funeral, but that's another topic for another time. So we know that Frigga loses her life in protecting Jane. Now, she's probably protecting Jane because he loves her, and of course she's going to protect the woman that her son loves. But then Loki's murdered as well because of Jane. He protects Jane twice in Svalheim, and that's a beautiful thing, like very leading into Loki's identity as a hero. Still hasn't got the respect he deserves, but that's for a Loki video another time, probably when season 2 comes out. I think they're filming it this summer, actually, which is very exciting. So Loki dies because of her. He wouldn't be in Svalheim if it wasn't for her and the ether and this whole thing. So Thor's now lost his mother and his brother, and is because of Jane, basically. now I do love her as a character, but like in reality, if you're with someone and your life starts falling apart and people around you start dying, it's not good. It's not a good thing. So just the real version of that, and the question to ask yourself is, with the person you have in your mind right now that you're trying to work out, are they good news? Are they bad news? Are they causing destruction in your life? That's not soulmate love, right? You could say that's a twin flame, that's a karmic person, whatever. But that's someone that's causing destruction in your life. You might learn a lot about yourself because of that person, but that's not like a long-term partnership vibe, when destruction's happening. What else? So that's bad. Point number 4, Thor tells his family about Jane. So this is actually a really good thing. So Jane is very, very meaningful to Thor. And even though, that Bifrost is destroyed and he can't get back to Earth, but he was on Earth, though, in the Avengers. I know Loki was kind of having a meltdown and he needed to, like, help his brother, and it was a whole thing. But he was on Earth and he wasn't like, hey, I'm just going to go and, like, see my girlfriend for a minute. He didn't. She says that in the Dark World, like, you were on Earth. I saw you on TV with your friends. Like, what the hell? But despite all the time that's passed, he's told his family about Jane. And there's that scene in the Dark World where she's in Asgard, she's in the Soul Forge, which is such a fascinating concept, the Soul Forge. I love that as a thing, as a concept. I wanted to know more about that and I have my own little headcanons about it. And Odin comes in and he's like, she does not belong here any more than a goat belongs at a banquet. And she's like, what the fuck, who are you talking to? And she comes across a little bit as like the American tourist, like a little bit like, what the hell? No offense to my American brethren, but she's kind of like the American in England. She's like, what are these things? It's like, that's what we have here. You're in England now. Like, that's the way it is. So she's basically like, who the fuck are you talking to? And then he's like, what does he say? I am Odin, King of Asgard, protector of the 9 realms. And she's like, oh, well, I know very well who you are, Jane Foster. And she turns to Thor and goes, you told your dad about me? And he's like, well, So we know that he's talked to Odin about her. So that's a good point. But I'm gonna kind of link this to point number 5, which is that Thor's dad hates Jane. Doesn't like her at all. He doesn't see mortals as being a good partnership for his son, which kind of makes sense in a way. I mean, it's all very Romeo and Juliet. It's all very tropey. It's all very, typical of what we see on the screen when, the parent doesn't approve, blah, blah, blah. But he does that whole thing of like, eat, be merry, revel in your victory of your battles, and you'd be better served by what's in front of you. And like Sif's there fighting, right? So obviously, Odin wants Thor to be with Sif. Like, that's the betrothal, that's the vibe. In my mind and in my heart, I think Thor ends up with Sif. I think that's how it is in the comics. I think it's canon in the comics, but in the MCU, I feel like that's the logical thing. That's the person he should end up with. Like, that makes more sense. That's a better partnership. That's a better fit. And we know that Sif is like, in love with Thor, and there's those scenes of like the celebration, and she's kind of looking at him, and you can tell that there's emotion there when he goes off to see Jane at night, or he goes off to see Heimdall to kind of keep watch over Jane. And the future king of Asgard should what he says, the future king of Asgard needs to have his eye on more than one of the realms or something. So Sif knows that he's going off to kind of watch his mortal lover. Her vibe is probably like, listen, I'm going to live for like 5,000 years, and this mortal's going to live for another 100 if she's lucky. So like, whatever, have your fun. Like, yeah, I know you'll come back to me. It's fine. That seems like the vibe with Thor and Sif. But anyway, we do know that Odin's not approving of that union because his son's, immortal and she's mortal. So we know Thor's dad doesn't like Jane. We know that Thor's mum does. Love Frigga. Thank God for Frigga, really, because without her, I mean, Thor and Loki would be even more fucked up, because she's a very loving woman and she just sees that her son is happy and that's enough for her, and she's going to protect the woman that her son loves. And I'm sure if, the situation was the same with Loki, I'm sure that she would do the same. We love Frigga. We do. Point 6, Thor abandons her. Thor abandons Jane quite frequently. He's like, see you later, I'm off. And he doesn't visit her when he's on Earth, and he's just like, right, I'm leaving. And it's interesting to me that in the Dark World, he's trying to like restore the peace to the realms. But he could have snuck away and saw her. It takes like 60 seconds in the Bifrost. Like, there's not really an excuse. We sort of go into like the after party and celebrating the battles. And what is it he says to Sif? Like, she enjoyed the battle of such and such so much she almost started a new one because the first one was so much fun. So like, they had a really rowdy party. So obviously he's partying after the battle, so it's not like he doesn't have time to just sneak away and see his girlfriend. Like, it's ridiculous. So he just like keeps abandoning her, and she's fine with it. She's fine with it apparently, until she's not, and then she dumps him in Ragnarok. It was a mutual dumping, Thor says, but sounds like it wasn't. She's like, I've had enough of this shit in my life. I'm done. Seventh point, the note is just Loki. So let's talk about that, shall we? So here's the thing. I used to be a Locaine shipper. Apparently I still am. Loki and Locaine being Loki and Jane. I call them brain freeze because she's smart and he's the frost giant. So brain freeze, that's the ship. I had it in my head that it was canon that they dated or something, but it's not. I've obviously seen way too much on AO3 over the years, and like it's just canon now. It isn't. But what I will say is I think Jane and Loki are a much better fit together, probably because I ship Loki with literally everyone, possibly because Jane's like, 5'2" and brunette and has a big mouth like me. I see myself in her. I'm probably projecting massively. But it just seems like they would be a better fit. Like, she's an astrophysicist with 3 PhDs. Loki's very, very intelligent, like genius level intellect. Thor's kind of stupid. Thor's got big muscles. That's kind of it. They're not actually well matched at all, Thor and Jane. But Loki and Jane, however, I think they'd look great together. So they've got my vote. And also we see Loki and Jane have more sexual chemistry in 5 seconds of staring at each other in Thor the Dark World than Thor and Jane had in the entirety of their relationship arc across like 2 films and 3 different films where she's referenced. I think Thor and Jane had better sexual chemistry. And I think she went to Asgard and she was like, oh, you're the murderer. You're kind of cute. You're a murderer. But she looks at him and goes, actually, now I'm looking at you and I'm looking at Thor. I think I might have made a mistake, might have made an error. And we also see how when Thor's like waving his hammer around on Svartalheim, trying to destroy the ether, like Loki's actually the one that protects her. He protects her when the ether's out in the open. He protects her from that when the ether's been destroyed and all the particles or the shards are falling down. He shields her with his body. And then there's the moment when Cursed throws the grenade that's kind of like a black hole energy thing. He throws her down and puts himself in harm's way and gets almost sucked into this black hole before Thor saves him. And there's this moment where Loki and Thor kind of fall down and Thor kind of just looks at him. It is just this look of like, don't. Which is interesting, right? Because he's just saved his brother. You think he'd be like, oh my God, Loki, you okay? You nearly got sucked into that black hole. He's just looking at his brother like, don't fucking think about it. I know you and you better fucking not. It's that kind of look. At least that's how I interpreted it. So actually, like, Loki protects Jane a lot more than Thor does. But then there's the whole thing of that conversation when they're on the way to Svartalheim or on the way into it, where he's like, what can I do with the power that flows through those veins? And he's like basically saying like, she's mortal, she's going to die. Like, what are you doing, Thor? But I just think they're a better match. That's what I've got to say about that. So shall we recap? I know that's a lot. I'm very passionate about this topic. So let's recap the 7 points and I'll say if they're good or bad. Jane falls apart when he leaves and drops everything when he comes back. That's bad. Second point, Thor becomes who he's meant to be because of her. That's good. Third point, Thor's mum and brother are murdered because of Jane. Bad, obviously. Point number 4, Thor tells his family about Jane. That's good. He's obviously talked about her before. Point number 5, but Thor's dad hates Jane and like has some kind of like weird internalized racism towards Midgardians. Bad. Point number 6, Thor abandons her quite a lot and doesn't go and see her when he should and just kind of drops her like whatever. Even though he's thinking about her, he's being kind of avoidant. So that's bad. Incidentally, before the 7th point, can I just say, this might be a different point, but I think Thor is a bit avoidant and Jane is actually a bit anxious in terms of attachment styles. I also think Jane's very codependent. Let's say that in a second. Point number 7, Loki. She has better chemistry with Loki and is frankly better suited to him and is on his level intellectually and not on each other's level. And I think they could have had some really interesting conversations about magic and science. You know, Thor says that thing about magic and science. I come from a world where they're one and the same. And Jane talks to Eric Selvig about that and says something about, magic is just science that we don't understand yet. So you've got a sorcerer and you've got an astrophysicist. Like, that's a match made in heaven. I would love to be a fly on the wall listening to them talk about that. Like, Jane's in Asgard, like reading books about like Asgardian magic, and she's like trying to understand the science of it. I mean, that's a partnership. That's a power couple. Um, so should I talk about Jane being codependent, or is that another topic for another time? Well, the codependency basically is the fact that she falls apart when he leaves, and she drops everything, drops her entire life the second he's back. That's codependency. Um, what else do I want to say about this? Oh, I want to start doing a new feature in these videos, and the feature is rank that relationship. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start creating a ranking each time I analyze a relationship. So far, the relationships I've analyzed the MCU are Thor and Jane, MJ and Peter Parker, and also Loki and Sylvie. So at number one, I'm going to put MJ and Peter Parker. Beautiful relationship, very healthy. Number two is going to be Loki and Sylvie, controversially. And number three is going to be Thor and Jane. As I analyze more relationships, those rankings will change, and I'll keep giving you an update of where we're at. I want to get to at least 10 and let me know who I should be analyzing next. Maybe I'll do Tony and Pepper. I feel like I want to do Nat, maybe Natasha and her relationship. Did she end up with Bruce Banner in the end? Was that when he was like half Hulk, half man? Because that's some kinky shit right there. Or was she with Steve for a bit? I know Steve went and did his thing with Peggy. I don't know. Who did Nat end up with? I don't really know. And whereabouts actually in the timeline was Black Widow the movie? I'm very confused about this. But I don't know. I'm confused. Or did she have a thing with Clint as well in the Avengers? I don't know. Look, we should talk about Natasha Romanoff. That's another video for another time. Thank you for being here. If you've watched all the way to the end, comment down with the word Asgard. Comment down with the word Asgard if you've made it all the way to the end. And if you enjoyed it, put the phrase goat at a banquet so I know that you enjoyed this video. Thank you for being here. This has been Love and Fandom. I've been Cheryl Muir. I will see you next time for more relationship analysis. And remember, you are absolutely worthy of love. I love you.